Good morning, everybody. Good morning. I love that. Some good energy today. My name is Christopher Adonis. I'm the Director of HIV, Hepatitis C, and STI Services at Access Health Louisiana. My pronouns are he, him, his, but for the friends in the room and the friends I'll make today, hey girl suffices. Again, I want to welcome you to the 2022 Stigma Summit. I don't know if anybody knows the history of this, but this has been going on since 2014, and we've managed to keep it going. So thanks for everyone who's attending today. I hope that we get to continue that on. It's because of the amazing and innovative work that we do that we must keep this going. We have some amazing speakers today who are leaders in their concentration of work. However, I consider today as a day of sharing wisdom because it's what we share and translate into doing that makes our work so successful, so powerful, and so magical. We have a long battle ahead, but I know for a fact that the people in this room will be who stand up against stigma and end the HIV epidemic. It is with excitement and a humble heart that I introduce our first panel today for stigma in healthcare settings. If you want to, panelists, as I say your names, if you want to come down and start taking your seat, that probably will help save a little bit of time as well. Our first panelist is Alea Nicole Williams. She put some acronyms, but she's definitely a doctoral candidate of social work. She's a licensed clinical social worker, psychotherapist who specializes in the work with transgender and gender non-conforming individuals. Alea is a Black woman of trans experience who has a great understanding of the inequality, stress, and mental health concerns that plague her community. In addition to her passion for trans mental health, Alea's passion for work with the disenfranchised people of color and members of all ethnic origins from marginalized communities drives her overall journey for social justice and equality. Alea was born and raised in the Alexandria, Louisiana area. Her down-home upbringing is at the foundation of her strong commitment to family and those she holds dear. Her education endeavors include a BS in psychology from Northwestern State University in Natchitoches, Louisiana, and a Master's of Science in Social Work from the University of Texas at Arlington. Alea is currently enrolled at Tulane University School of Social Work, pursuing a doctoral social work degree. She has been practicing as a licensed clinician for nearly 10 years in a variety of settings and is licensed in various states across the U.S. The opportunity to work in a variety of jurisdictions has afforded Alea the opportunity to develop a vivid and extensive knowledge base and also an immensely savvy expertise for navigating systems and resources often utilized by the individuals she serves. Thank you for being here today. In addition to her several academic and career endeavors, Alea has worked to keep her hands in the behind-the-scenes work as a form of activism, especially in regards to issues related to trans and LGBTQIA plus equity and access issues that impact the Black community, and issues of injustice impacting many other disenfranchised populations. She is currently serving on the PFLAG of New Orleans Board of Trustees, as well as on the Louisiana State Department of Health's RIB Advisory Board. Ms. Williams also partners with several other entities in the community to serve the overall fight against oppression. Alea asserts her ultimate goal is to guide anyone who she works with to empower a superb sense of self. Our next speaker is Dr. Michael Lewis Benjamin Robinson, is a licensed psychotherapist and public health practitioner with over 20 years of experience. Michael was my boss. I did not know his middle name. Providing services in a variety of capacities, including program development, substance abuse counseling, youth programs, behavioral and community level interventions, infectious disease prevention and care, workshop facilitation, development, community mobilization planning, and grant writing. Dr. Benjamin is the co-founder of and a principal consultant with the Bach Group, a New Orleans-based population minority health capacity support practice. He is also the CEO and primary psychotherapist of Bach Therapeutic Counseling Services, an executive board member of the New Orleans Association of Black Social Workers, a member of the 100 Black Men of Greater New Orleans, and a board member of the Pelican Center for Children of Families. Dr. Benjamin Robinson is an adjunct assistant professor of social work at his alma mater, Southern University in New Orleans, and has served as adjunct faculty at Tulane School of Social Work. Our next panelist is Clover Veith. Clover, pronouns they, them, theirs, is a community health worker here in the New Orleans under an EHE program for almost 2 years. They are a part of and an advocate for the LGBTQ plus community and always encouraging people to stand up and speak out for who they need, for who and what they need. Our next panelist is Sonia Milliman, is a native of rural New York who has 2 children of her own and reared 4 others. She also has 2 grandchildren and who has been living with undetectable HIV for 5 years. She currently resides in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, where she works at Capital Area Reentry Program as a harm reduction and prevention coordinator. She is a member of the Positive Women's Network USA Louisiana chapter, co-chair for committees for ending the HIV epidemic on both city and state levels, members of the Louisiana Coalition on Criminalization and Health, a U=U and HINAC5 ambassador, and secretary of Baton Rouge Transitional Grant Area Ryan White Advisory Council. She is dedicated to enhancing the lives of all those who are thriving with HIV, like herself, and those who suffer from the systemic racism, classism, and who are struggling with addiction. Our next panelist is Dr. Derry, Dr. Mark Allen Derry. He is an infectious disease physician and public health practitioner. He is the Chief Innovative Officer and Medical Director for Infectious Disease at Access Health Louisiana, the largest federally qualified health center in Louisiana with 35 clinics statewide. He is also the director of 2 HRSA Ryan White grants, Part A and Part F, that provide no low-cost care to people living with HIV, with an emphasis on human rights and social justice. Dr. Derry founded the community radio station in New Orleans, 102.3 FM WHIV LP. During the COVID pandemic, he started a daily 10-minute podcast, COVID Noise Filter, concentrating on reporting on COVID with social, economic, and racial justice lenses. The show is syndicated across the country through the Pacifica Network. More recently, he has been creating animations to help explain COVID vaccines and HIV. You can find them at noisefiltershow.org. Dr. Derry takes long walks with his wife and plays bass in several bands in New Orleans in his free time. Our next panelist is Qaida Mutefa. Qaida describes herself as a global citizen who creates and uncovers synergistic connections that have a transformative impact on individuals, organizations, and companies. This is evidenced by her career. Currently, Qaida serves as the Senior Community Liaison with Gilead Sciences. Before joining Gilead Sciences, she was the Community Liaison with Merck for over 7 years. Qaida's favorite quote: "She appreciates the culture of New Orleans and loves its people. Love is a verb and a noun, words and actions." Qaida is a human first, then a mother, partner, sister, aunt, undercover comedian. Qaida will become a philanthropist and a diplomat, but before she leaves this earth. And she always makes sure to say she is a social worker first.
We don't get no applause in that?
I love you, girl.
I mean, we didn't get paid for it.
And then our next person is our moderator for this session. We all know that she does not need an introduction, but I will do that. Gina Brown is a woman living with HIV for 28 years. She has worked in the field of HIV for 20 plus years, most recently as the Director of Strategic Partnerships and Community Engagement at the Southern AIDS Coalition. Gina graduated magna cum laude from Southern University at New Orleans with a Bachelor's of Social Work and a minor in History in 2011. She received her graduate degree of Social Work in 2012. Gina is a former member of the Presidential Advisory Council on HIV/AIDS. Gina has served on numerous boards and committees. She currently serves as co-chair of the Well Project Community Advisory Board. Gina is a public health speaker and community advocate. She has appeared in many magazines and publications, including Pause, Ebony, and Jet magazine. Gina is an ambassador for the Greater Than AIDS initiative, appearing in the Women, HIV, and Intimate Partner Violence video. In 2017, Gina was awarded the Flamethrower Award from the Red Door Foundation. She was also recently honored at Black AIDS Institute Heroes in the Struggle with the Activist Award. Gina truly believes in service work and has made it her life mission to help the broader community gain a higher level of health literacy. So I'll turn this over to Gina. Please give everybody an applause.
Are you supposed to speak after that?
First of all, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
How y'all doing? It is so good to be home and to be with my people. Yes, I have SAC in my bio still, but I have Kaida's old job at Merck as community liaison.
That was always your job. I was just filling in.
So I'm really excited to see her and to see y'all. So we're gonna get this party started. We're gonna talk about stigma this morning. And I'm gonna ask the panelists, starting off with this question. What are some stigmatizing practices that you have witnessed or experienced in healthcare settings? It can be like the most extreme stuff. We wanna hear about that. But we also wanna hear about the routine stuff. What do you see often in these settings? And whoever wants to start, we're gonna keep it our answers kinda short because we have a little time, but we wanna get through all of them. So who wants to start?
I'll start. Wait a minute, yeah. I don't think I need a mic, but come on, Dr. Deere. So good to see you, our COVID man. So hey everybody, good morning. I hope y'all heard it. Hey Don, I hope y'all heard it in the introduction. I got 2.5 years in this job, so don't trip. Believe me, I believe in succession planning. So one of the most extreme things that I've experienced, so at Merck I covered 6 states. So I saw FQHCs intimately, personally. And here in Louisiana for Gilead, I covered just the state of Louisiana in all areas. One of the most extreme things that I've seen, Gina, that continues to this day is the lack of eye contact. Oprah Winfrey has a saying, and her saying is, out of her 25 years of doing this work, right, of working with people in interviewing them, she says there are 3 things that every human being wants. The first thing is, do you see me? Do you hear me? Does what I say matter to you? Oftentimes in HIV, we get clouded by the HRSA requirements. We get clouded by all the ish. We get clouded by if someone applied for a job at Gilead and didn't get a call back. That's not our issue. Right? We get clouded by our predecessors. We get clouded by what someone else may have done. And that, my friend, continues to permeate like a cancer. It is a cancer. And for many of us, I got to look at Kaita every morning. But for many of us, I have to say to Kaita, what did you do today to make somebody's life better? And last but not least, I have to remember that oftentimes, people like Dr. Deary and our mental health professionals here were told they were essential workers, right? When in HIV for 40 plus years, our essential people are who? People living with HIV. So I don't understand how someone can be essential when it's convenient for you, and then when they get on your nerves, they are not essential. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it.
Thank you. I'll just tell, it's a great question, and it made me think, and I landed on myself. So I'm going to show how me as a representative of the healthcare community, how we stigmatize. So when I first moved to New Orleans, when HIV, especially AIDS, was so much more prevalent with respect to hospitalizations, fortunately it's not anymore. Fortunately, medications, Biktarvy, 1 pill once a day has gone such a long way, and I don't see the same pathology that we used to see back in the day. But it was common for me to walk into a room, see a person of trans experience, recognize them as a person of trans experience, but call them the name that was on their chart. And I think that's a deeply stigmatizing behavior. And it wasn't until somebody pointed it out to me. Right? And so that's why education is so important, because you have people like me that we're just trying to do the right thing. No one ever told me, right? I didn't know. I should have known. There was something in the back of my head that said this doesn't feel right, but I didn't come to the surface. And once it was pointed out to me, if I walk into a room and I see a person of trans experience, I now bend over backwards to make sure that their preferred name and pronouns are on the chart, and it's very much there. And I will also make sure that whatever it is that they will need to help them feel comfortable, because oftentimes when you're in the hospital, you are stripped down to nothing but a gown. But if it's makeup, a wig, or whatever it is that helps you feel like yourself, I think it's important for us to do that. So again, using my own personal experience to share how in the healthcare field, these are the things that we need to be aware of. And I know that, again, I'm speaking to the choir here, but education, and sometimes educating our healthcare professionals gently. Sometimes we don't need to use a hammer. Sometimes a gentle feather, just a little tickle, just helps so much, because again, we're in this field to do the right thing, and it just took a little push, and then it got so much out of it. So thank you for the opportunity. Great question. Thank you.
It is a great question. And of course, I come after you on this one. A year ago, I went in for a routine colonoscopy. 50 years old plus, we got to do that. And, they drew my blood. I've had, and since I have acquired HIV, I've probably had, 6 surgeries, I think. And this is the first time that this has happened to me. But I went in for this routine colonoscopy. They did my IV. A couple drops of blood were on the blanket. One hit the floor. The immediate people working with me, like the anesthesiast, they didn't react at all. A nurse stepped in, stepped back out, and a few minutes later, she comes in, 2 other nurses. They all got gloves up to here, real thick ones. I'm laying there thinking, this is really 2022? Seriously? For one, that blood hit the air, and I'm undetectable, guys, and they literally had all the cleaning supplies, and I just looked up at the anesthesia. That's really nothing like stigmatizing a person. As soon as I came out of that, I got onto my chart and I sent a message. I had a call right away from the supervisor, and I said, do y'all need us to come down and educate y'all? Because this is wrong. You know what? I had to do a follow-up because it didn't go right. I literally just made that follow-up, and I go in January. It took me, in my job, in the advocacy that I do in the last 4 years, it took me a year. Somebody's going to die of colon cancer. That's my story.
Can y'all hear me? Oh, yeah, I can hear me.
Well, you need a mic.
I need a mic?
Yes, you do, baby.
Okay. So the very first doctor's appointment I made when I moved here from Houston, because I moved here 7 years ago in January. And the very first appointment I made was for an STI screen because I was in a new city. I didn't get tested before I moved here, and it was very important to me to get tested as soon as I got here, so that I could have, obviously my screens to show anyone I wanted to date. Well, I went in and I told them I just wanted an STI screen, and they're like, oh, what symptoms are you having? And I was like, oh, I'm not having any symptoms. I don't think that I have anything. I'm just taking, I'm being proactive in my sexual health. And she was just like, and she hummed and hawed over it, and she was like, okay. Well, I went in the back, and the nurse was asking me all kinds of questions. She asked me how many people I slept with. I was like, I don't know. And, a few. And she was just like, no, I need a number. And I was like, all right, more than 2, less than 50. That's all you get. And she was like, what do you mean less than 50? You sure it's less? And I was like, oh my God. I was horrified, and I was so embarrassed, and I was so angry. I started crying because she slut-shamed me every point of the way. And so after all of those intrusive questions and the judgment that I got from the nurse and all that stuff, I went over next door to Quest. It was really convenient because it was right next door. And I walked in and I got my blood drawn, and I was just like, I usually have to pee in a cup for these kind of things. Like, why didn't I do that? And she was like, oh, this is just a thyroid panel. Excuse me? Excuse me. I went back in there and I yelled at the front desk. I went and I yelled at the doctor, and I went and I yelled at I lost my marbles. Because not only did they slut shame me, but they fat shamed me too, and they didn't give me what I went in there for.
There you go.
Yes.
Listening to Sonia and Clover really embodied kind of the comments that I wanted to make. I didn't really think of us. I could probably think of hundreds of incidences, but they were just kind of all flooding my mind. But as I was listening to these ladies who were talking about very personal experiences, I think, again, they really embody what I feel like maybe we need to discuss in this room, because as the plenary speaker mentioned this morning, we're all the choir. I mean, I feel like many of you in this room, I've seen you and been in this fight for years. So it's not as if majority of this room doesn't understand what the stigma related to HIV really means and what that means in our work and in our lives as well. But I would like for us to think about some of the things that these ladies just shared, because they happen among healthcare professionals.
Yes.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I'm just letting you know.
I'm sorry. People. The individuals here that just shared. And that I think as those who are working in the industry, that we have to be cognizant of how to make sure that we are not within the work perpetuating that stigma. Sometimes without trying to. You know, we maybe have good intentions, and we have to be careful about our good intentions, because that's not always enough. And I just would ask for each one of us to think personally within our particular areas of work, you know, how we might unconsciously do those things. For example, when we look at the data that comes out sometimes, I've seen us in these meetings where slowly but surely it starts to become a little bit of a battle between maybe African American MSM and trans women and African American women and white gay men, like who needs the funding, who deserves the attention, who deserves the programming, and then how do we hire based on those things. We sometimes are unconsciously participating in tokenism, because sometimes we go to these agencies and we see one trans woman to represent what we feel like is a huge issue in our community, and so we're not really contributing to the problem. We are contributing to the problem in ways that we're not always thinking about. When we put out advertisements on billboards and in commercials, sometimes we may need to think about, well, where are we placing those billboards? One quick, and I promise I'll be through. I know you said be quick. When I was working at the State Department of Health, we were asked to do, there was a rise in and specifically syphilis. And around the table, the conversation was, how would we market this to individuals that needed to know this? We knew what the numbers were. We knew what the community that needed to hear this message. So obviously the conversation went to, well, can we find a model black woman? Maybe she's pregnant, because we're looking at congenital syphilis, and we'll have a statistic there. Fortunately, as the marketing director at that time, I refused. I said, no way, we will not do that. We will not put a black woman pregnant talking about syphilis in one of these zip codes where those women will see that, because it communicates to them and to everyone else who sees it that you are the problem. And we just have to be considerate of how, even in our efforts to do the right thing, that we can sometimes add to that stigma. So I just wanted to say that real quick. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I won't be long, I promise. So listening to Sonia and Clover's accounts of their experiences in healthcare, I have a similar, and I'll keep it very short, experience. In 2019, I had to relocate back to my hometown of Alexandria, Louisiana, and if anybody knows where that is, then God bless you. But as I relocated back from Dallas, having inherited a child, and after the passing of my mom and everything, I had to get reestablished in care. And I had to go to providers that were local. And I was trying to get reestablished in care in order to restart my hormone therapy. And so I went in and I met with this cisgender white man, and it was just one of the worst encounters that I've ever had in healthcare. When he walked into the room, his demeanor was very closed off. He had already just walked in and automatically assumed, you know, what I was there for. He specifically asked me, well, are you here to get tested? Like, what do you need? I'm not a woman that's living with HIV, but that was the assumption that he came in and made. I explained to him that I was just trying to get reestablished in care. I needed to, you know, restart my hormones and everything. Well, why do you want to take hormones? Like, what do you need this for? Like, what do you... I'm like, well, you know, I've been a patient here before. I have all my records. Like, did you review my records? And I'm not a person that walks around, you know, like, oh, I'm super educated and I'm a social worker and I do all that. I don't walk around like that. I'm, you know, a day-to-day person. So this person is just, you know, assuming I'm just, you know, just a regular person. And so he just went on to just say, you know, this is kind of dangerous. I don't know how I feel about doing this. And I stopped him and I said, well, you know, doctor, that's fine. You have the right not to choose to treat me, but I would hope that you would be able to language that and let me know so that I can find another provider. For 15 more minutes, he sit there and he berated me, and I just kind of let him talk to kind of see where he was going. Well, you need to see an endocrinologist, and I just don't know that this is the place for you to come and do this, and all these things. And he then said, I said, well, you know, my best friend and I have both come here before. We've been treated here. And so I'm not understanding what the problem is. If you can't treat me, I can get another provider. Well, I don't know that any provider here should be doing that. And so at that point, I became extremely livid. I just exited the room. Like for a minute, I was so angry I had tears in my eyes. And then the social worker in me automatically kicked in. And so I went to the administrator's door and demanded to speak with her. And in the process of all of that, I asked for my medical records. And so in my note, he went into my note and misgendered me, misdiagnosed me, called me a transvestite. I mean, anything you can think of, he had put in my note. And so what that reminded me of was just that when anyone comes into care, whether it be for medical care, whether it be for behavioral health care, they come to us or we go to providers vulnerable, and we go and we're automatically giving you a layer of trust that you should honor. As a provider, when we come to you, we're coming to you for your expertise and not your judgment. We're coming to you for your knowledge in your field and not your opinion of my life. As patients or people who are pursuing services, we have to remember that when people step into, even though you're the expert in your field, they're the expert in their life. And you have to honor and respect their autonomy. So my message to anyone who is struggling with fighting through stigma is step back. If you feel like you have a bias around a certain thing, step away, get another colleague to step in before you do more harm to that individual.
Social worker.
I'm the moderator, but I have the permission to tell y'all a quick story. 28 years ago, I gave birth to my daughter, and when I was in the hospital, when I was in labor, everybody, the housekeeper and everybody came in my room and read my chart because the nurses were talking about me outside in the hall. So they all came in. I threatened to do something to this housekeeper. I didn't do it. I'm not in jail. But anyway, When I delivered my baby, they put me at the end of the hall at University Hospital, and nobody ever came in my room. They brought my food, they brought it to the outside, they knocked on the door, and they left. I had to get up and get my tray, bring it in the room. When they would bring my baby to the room, they would knock on the door, and I would get up, and she would be in a little thing, and I would get her and bring her in the room. I was treated like crap. I was newly diagnosed, and I was suicidal. And they didn't even know it, they didn't even care. And I had the best team of nurses, because I was in a study, I was in 076, y'all, which was the AZT study. And I told my nurses what happened. And they did an in-service at University Hospital with all of the doctors and nurses. Because I've always been me, y'all. Even when I was, you know, like stuck in my stigma, I was always this mouth that would talk and speak up. But I don't do it for me, I do it for other people, and that's why I spoke up, because I didn't want another woman to come in that hospital to deliver a baby and be put at the end of that hall. Stigma is real. So we're gonna keep it going. I'm gonna call on certain people now. So I wanna start with you, Dr. Derrick. How does stigma impact HIV testing? In your practice, what do you see with, you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah. So, I mean, as an HIV provider, people come to me, they're already positive. So, you know, a couple things. I think one was normalizing HIV testing, I think was incredibly important. And making that something that, you know, and I've said this a million times, you know, I've tested my parents live on media. I've tested my mother-in-law, and after Katrina, when the city was a lot smaller and I used to do a little bit more internal medicine, the nuns from the French Quarter used to come see me as their internists, and I would test them as openly as possible, because they would always want to be tested to help kind of destigmatize. And they thought it was funny that I was testing nuns, and in retrospect, it is kind of funny. I was pretty, and then President Obama came to UNO. Do you remember when he came to UNO and I had a test with me, and I wanted to test him, do that mock testing that we did with HAMP, and we'll talk about that in a second. But he ended up, and everybody, like, the way he chose questions was the people in the crowd that were rooting for somebody, and I had a bunch of people rooting for me, but he ended up choosing that little six-year-old little boy who asked, "Why do they hate you so much?" And I was like, yeah, I'm glad that was. So for me, what I did, you know, was start the HAMP series, the HIV Awareness Music Project, and we did 10 of them over the course of 10 years, where every World AIDS Day we would have a show somewhere, either in the French Quarter or somewhere. It was a big concert where we would have artists that would do that mock testing of HIV on stage, and the idea was to try to destigmatize the testing process, and you know, and I've always said, if I could get somebody like a Lil Wayne or somebody, or like President Obama, to show the process. And again, of course, you're seeing me do this because that was the days when we were using the OraQuick or the OraSures. If we could see somebody of great stature test, that is how we would destigmatize HIV testing. And so, yeah. So anyway, thank you. Those are my stories. So thank you.
And I should have asked you the second question, but I'm going to ask my friend Sonia the second question. How does stigma impact access to care?
Shoot, nobody wants to go. I mean, who wants to see you walking into a building that's like, "Hey, man, you got HIV, come here." You know, I mean, honestly, when I was diagnosed, I acquired here in Louisiana, by the way, on vacation. And when I went back to New York, thankfully I tested yearly. Regular testing, guys, know your status. And it just, I didn't want to go to the local one. You know, I was like, okay, if I'm getting this confirmatory test, we're like, oh, well, you can go right down the street. Oh, hell no. Man, I hang in these streets, you know. Those are my streets I walked in. I'll go to Buffalo. I'll go a couple hours away. You know, it's like me coming down from Baton Rouge to here. And yeah, I didn't want to go myself. I wanted to go all that ways. I mean, now I would. I mean, I don't care. I go back in my hometown and I scream it from the rooftops now. Thanks to all my inspiration I get down here, Gina. But, people don't want to come in, even being a tester in Baton Rouge and telling my story. Like, people come in, I'm the harm reduction coordinator, so I'm coordinator for the Be Safe Syringe program, the only one in Baton Rouge at the moment. And, I started to be like, hey, look, I got HIV, check me out, can we test you, please? I just want you to be healthy like me. And even then, they don't want to test. But again, who wants to test if you can go to jail, baby? Another story with healthcare, I have a friend, I was going to say friends with benefits, come on, we all have them. I've had for 4 years, telling that man I was undetectable HIV, showing him all my, everything. And all of a sudden one day he was like, whoa, wait, you have HIV? I'm like, and then he's just like, well, you obviously haven't accepted it because you keep saying you have undetectable. No, what I'm telling you is I have HIV, but I cannot transmit this virus to anyone because if you can't find it in my blood, I can't transmit it. Does this man not go to his doctor, and I'm going to say the city, I don't know which doctor, but St. Gabriel, and does that doctor tell him, well, you're negative now, but come back in about 5 to 10 years because it's going to show up? True story. Talk about stigma, so now here I sit wondering, is this man going to come back and bite me on this one? Because this doctor told him it could show up in 5 to 10 years? Am I looking like, oh wait, go on to one of the breakout sessions later and you'll hear more from Mandisa on that one. Did that answer?
Yes. Michael, how does HIV stigma impact health outcomes? You worked at the health department. How does it impact health outcomes?
That's a good question. So, when I look at those type of things, I try to look at it from the bottom up. How does it impact the individual, so that we look at the total outcomes? In my mind, it's okay for us to look at the totality of how it would affect entire groups or entire populations of people. But if I can't understand how it affects this person that's sitting in front of me and break it down to that level, then I might be missing some of the picture here. So I think about what keeps the individual, as Sonia was kind of alluding to, what keeps the individual from getting there. Obviously, fear is a big part of it, right? And that's a big part of what stigma does, right? But as a mental health provider, I really was searching for what the core of what this particular disease does to people. Because many of us come to the table, come into this world with deficiencies for many different reasons. None of us are perfect. And sometimes those deficiencies have to do with our own worthiness and how much we love ourselves. And then when you add something as devastating as HIV to that, it begins to add on to this idea of, am I even worthy? Am I worthy of love? Am I worth saving? And so we ask ourselves the question, did I deserve this? Am I worth saving? Will the people even care? So before we can even get out of bed, before we can make a phone call, before we can go to get medications, people have to deal with those internalized issues, which is a part of the stigma that they're hearing from everyone else that says that maybe you deserve this. It's your own fault. You're a bad person. You're dirty, infected. See, remember that was the word that we all used. It was adding to the stigma without us really understanding that what it was doing to people. But we all had our good intentions, did we not? So when we look at the outcomes, we have to be very clear about that this is a very individualistic disease as well. So how do we create outcomes for our entire communities? By each one teaching one, as I see it, making sure that each one of us are doing our own particular job to help that one person that is sitting in front of us. By each one of us doing what we have been called to do, then we can realize greater outcomes from people. I have seen community health workers, peer navigators be the lifeblood of making this turn around. So we have to look at those things that we know work. Those things work. So why wouldn't we use those things that work? And we need to speak to those funders who would like to go with trends and say, oh, well, guess what? There's this new thing we'd like to try. But we already know some things that we've been doing have been working. So why would we change from that just because there's a political expediency to do something that makes other people feel good about themselves? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm talking too much. Let me stop here.
Dr. Derry?
Gina, thank you so much, and I don't mean to take space that I haven't been asked. But I just want to respond to something that I think is so important that you said, Michael, and that is it actually starts at the point of diagnosis. And I, as a provider, when I was in residency, the charity hospital of Cleveland was called Cleveland Metro Hospital, and that's where I did my internal medicine residency at the charity of Cleveland. And I would, as I was, of course, going to infectious diseases, talking to people living with HIV, and they would tell me the day they were diagnosed and the experience they had. And I always promised myself that once I was in that seat, that I would always make it as least a traumatic experience as possible. And right now, I bat 1,000 in making sure that everybody's smiling and actually laughs and hugs me at the end of every time that I give a diagnosis, and I'll explain to you why. And just if I could just have one little pushback on a word that you said HIV was devastating, and I usually talk about HIV as being good news. And I talk about HIV, so I give the diagnosis and they pause and I let it settle in and I go, but let me talk to you about the good news of HIV. The good news of HIV is that people living with HIV have the same life expectancy as people who don't have HIV, and they have this quality of life as people who don't have HIV. Then the second thing I say is that the virus ends with you. Because most people are decent people. They don't want to transmit the virus to somebody else. They don't do, I forget what, I have a saying that I say, but I can't say it right now because I'm a little emotional. So they don't want to transmit the virus, and I talk to them about U equals U. And then the next thing I do is I give them their first pill.
Thank you.
And then after they take the pill and they drink, I take the cup and I drink after them. And they look at me as, why did you do that? And that's the moment that I share with them that you can't get it from drinking. You get it through intercourse or through sharing needles. That's the most common ways. But when you go home tonight and talk to your family, they're going to hide the utensils. They're going to hide the plates. They're going to give you something different. And that's a stigmatizing behavior right there. And I go, you tell them that your HIV doctor drank from the cup that you drank from, right? And then they're not going to do that anymore. And it's been very helpful. They will come back and say that was exactly what happened. And but the point that I'm making here, and Gina, thank you for the opportunity, is that it starts at the point of diagnosis, and I give a lecture to other providers on how to give an appropriate HIV diagnosis, because everybody with HIV will tell you the day they were diagnosed and that it was a complete nightmare. And that's when the stigma starts, and we have to actually stop that process immediately.
No, I'm going to say for myself, and of course, look at me, And I was in New York. I walked into my appointment and my doctor said, "You're all right. I'm going to get you to Buffalo." I had already made my appointment because luckily I had a friend who's still thriving 27 years later with HIV. Few perished. He did have a stroke recently. But I asked him where to go, so I went to Buffalo and they started me on my treatment. But at that first appointment, when I called my regular doctor and said I need a confirmatory, and I sat in his office, he told me about U equals U. That moment, and honest to God, that was my biggest fear. It wasn't my life, and I'm not, it's 100%. I am not willing to harm another person. So for me, hearing U equals U on that first appointment, it was amazing for me, because that was my biggest fear. I really don't care what people think of me. and I do now more, and I am an inactive surviving addict, so inactive. But that really took that relief off. So, and for you to do that is like, that's going to take a lot from a lot of people, because that is their biggest fear. Nobody's going to talk to me, And of course, when I first heard I had HIV, I was like, oh, there goes my sex life. And again, that U equals U made me feel a whole lot better about it.
Kaida, I know that a lot of your work has been in clinics, working with providers, your customers, things like that. So tell me, how does stigma operate in a healthcare setting?
Come on, Kaida.
I mean, will I have a job Monday? I'm saying, where do I start?
Stays in this room.
She.
No, I'm just playing. Y'all supposed to tell a friend.
Y'all know me. I'm not Catholic, but pray for me. I can't even do the cross. I do the eggs. Repeat the question one more time, because I'm over 40. Say it slow.
How does stigma operate in healthcare settings at the clinical level?
Wow. That's a really powerful question for a lot of reasons. One of which you and I know intimately, right? So Gina made the reference that in industry, we, sometimes they call them different things. I call them my community partners, right? Like, I can't do any of this without community partners. And sometimes our community partners may have levels of education as, Dr. Michael or Dr. Deary, and they may have a level of willingness and acumen and commitment to go against the grain. Some, maybe two, on one finger. And then you have the others that, by virtue of HIV is where I landed, it may not be who I am or what I do or how I will end my life, have to eventually fit into HIV. And so what I've seen is that it manifested itself in several ways. One, the inability for us to move forward and to think outside of the box and to do things that makes us feel uncomfortable, right? So it's that internalized stigma, because I'm also stigmatized even though I'm projecting the stigma. Another thing that I've seen very, very frequently, and I'm sure a lot of you have seen this as well, is how medications are prescribed, right? And oftentimes, some people may be just grouped into a population that receives a particular type of medication and not looking at the individual. For example, everybody that walks in should not get the Mutepfa pill. The Mutepfa pill is going to work for some people, but not for all. But if I take time to talk to the person, to understand the nuances of their lives, to understand the fullness and wholeness of who they are, I realize, well, okay, even though the Mutepfa pill may be the best pill on the market, but this person is a mother, right? She does burlesque on the weekends. She has a full life. And if I give her something that may not speak to everything of who she is and how she shows up in the world, that, my friend, ends up being a projection of stigma, right? They all got HIV. Just give them that drug. Just give them that drug, right? Let's just give... It was prescribed in 1994, but let's just still give them that drug. Right? Because, they have an addiction history. They live in this zip code. And I went to one conference and I heard that the zip codes matter, right? Not paying attention to your own zip code or your household, right? And so a lot of times it shows up with how we group people into very unfortunate boxes where they don't belong, and we don't spend the time necessary in order to invest in learning and really connecting with the full person.
Clover. How does stigma operate at an individual level in healthcare settings?
Do you mean like the person that is like internal stigma?
It could be internal. It could be like you walk to the front desk and the receptionist says something.
Well, the stigma that I receive a lot is transphobia. A lot of people don't think that my gender exists, and they don't think that it matters, and they don't take me seriously for it because, my pronouns are plural. And so I started going by new pronouns, and people don't like those either. So I don't know what to do about it. Oh, Z, them.
Oh, I know those.
Yeah, people don't use those either. But I go into a health setting expecting to be misgendered. I expect to be dead named. I expect to be not respected for who I am as a person. And I expect to be fat shamed and slut shamed. All of those are my experience when I go to the doctor, right? I can't imagine, on top of all of those things, also having HIV stigma added on to all of that. People already don't want to touch me because they think I'm weird. I usually have rainbow hair, and I dress extraordinarily sometimes. I'll wear something like super bougie one day, and then super, anyway. But stigma has such a negative effect on me that I don't go to the doctor when I need to. I go to urgent care because I know they'll misgender me there, and I don't have a relationship with them, so it doesn't matter. But I don't have a GP because I haven't found a doctor that takes me seriously, that listens to me, that takes into account who I am as a person and what they should be doing. I have mental health doctors, and all of that is taken care of, and that's fine. But every time I go into a doctor's office, I have to teach someone something, and it's exhausting. It's not my job. Y'all should know this by now. This is not new. I'm not new. My gender isn't new. My pronouns aren't new. It's been out for a while now, and it's still just something that people don't want to respect. And I guess that's the stigma that I receive, is all of the disrespect for who I am and what I stand for.
Yes. Thank you. I don't want to butcher your name, Alea.
You got it.
All right, Alea. Thinking about that same thing, how does stigma operate in the healthcare settings, but how does it operate on a policy structural level?
Oh my goodness. I think is this on? Oh, okay. I think we've seen that play out, especially over the past several years, just how many policies have just been so violent against people of color in general, specifically against our trans youth, how they've come and, done everything and are doing everything within their power to diminish our existence. And it starts with our youth. If they wipe us out at the youth, then, there will be no older population. So when I see that play out in policy, I see it play out in places that can do the simplest things, like incorporate, pronouns and spaces for true names in medical records. Some of the easiest things to do, as Clover is saying, when they walk into... Okay. When they walk into, settings where, they aren't sure if they're going to be misgendered. Why is that such a hard thing when you walk into an office for you to just say, hey, good morning, or if you know the person by name, good morning, Clover? How hard is it to say that versus, hey, ma'am, hey, sir, or, or just looking at someone, based on their appearance and just automatically assuming that, they are who you think they are. I think that compassion could go a long way if we can incorporate that into policy, especially as clinicians. I think that we have to get more and more people of diverse experience behind the scenes in developing those policies. even in organizations that aren't necessarily corporate, we still have this hierarchy of, cis white supremacy that is forming, these policies. And until we can shift that and shake that up more, we're going to continue to see, people hurt by these policies. So.
That's right. Kaida and then Michael.
No, let him go first. He got a PhD.
And he worked hard.
And he lost his brain. He lost his marks because of the PhD.
It's never a dull moment with Kaida. No, thank you for those comments. I really appreciate that. We do have to get, our voices need to be heard. If we're not at those tables, if we're not pushing our legislators, if we're not pushing those policies within our agencies, so there's big P policy and there's little P policy. Those little P policies are ones in our agencies and our communities that maybe help us move the needle on that. But then there are also our policies that we look to our congressmen and our senators and what have you to help us change. And when we look at the state of Louisiana, for example, one place or a couple of places that we can all find ourselves where we can make our voices heard. One is the decriminalization of HIV, which is still a problem in this state on multiple different levels. We have people who are suffering as a result of that. We have people who are maybe sex workers, for example, who are unjustly, penalized by such type of legislation. But then we also, all the way to the another side of individuals suffering from these laws who that are not based on science. You can just bite someone, for example, and that might get you put in jail or at least, arrested. That's, just the science needs to keep up with our legislation, and it's up to people like us in this room to make sure that our legislators are brought up to speed on that thing. And then one other policy that I feel like we can all really be more active in is the comprehensive sex education. If we're talking about trying to destigmatize these conversations, then what better ways than to start with our young people in school so that sex is not a taboo subject in the first place. Let's be honest, the reason why HIV is a taboo type of subject and the reason why it's surrounded by stigma is because that whole sex thing is mixed in there. We all know that you don't have to have sex to get HIV. We know that that's not the only way that it's transmitted, but because it's in the conversation, it demonizes it for people, and it allows for people to use it as a way to make you feel othered and less than and different. And so if we were to start with our young people, because we have seen that if you allow the young people to just be themselves, they don't have all of these isms that we give to them. They're okay with you looking differently than you are, than you have a different color. They may ask questions, but once they get used to it, they're like, oh, okay, they're gay. Oh, that person's trans. Oh, that person's black. That person's white. That person's Jewish. That person's Catholic. It doesn't matter to them. We're doing it to them. So if we can start at the base with things like comprehensive sex education can be a start, then we can reduce some of the stigma around a number of different things, including HIV. Thank you.
So I just want to read something to everyone really quick. May I be a guard for those who need protection, a guide for those on the path, a boat, a raft, a bridge for those who wish to cross the flood. May I be a lamp in the darkness. That's a portion of a meditation that I do. How many of y'all listen to Tank and the Bangers? Raise your hand. Yes, I saw that one hand in the back go real fast, right? Some of y'all go to church with them. Some of them, your cousin. One of the songs that Tank and the Bangers has, and the chorus says, I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. I'm doing my best. And so for those of us where this work is who we are, our lives, we're doing our best. Sometimes even with doing our best, we can be less compassionate, right? And so when I think about being a bridge, I think about how even though we may have expectations of people to perform in a particular way by virtue that they work in HIV, they're human beings and they're doing their best. And sometimes, even though their best may not meet your expectation, right? Whether we're receiving services, trying to get a sponsorship from this person, trying to get some data from this person, trying to get them on a panel, realizing that everyone that is in this field is doing their best. And I feel really compelled to say that because it can come off as if, oh, it's so simple. Just change your pronoun. You know, I'm going to pick on Michael. You know, Michael, you've been doing this. You misgendered me. You missed this. He's doing his best. And if we go in with the assumption that the person has good intent in their heart, regardless of how they look, what they say, what they do, how they move, in that particular moment, it could have been that's all they can do. And until we are able to have those conversations with people to really understand, okay, nurse so-and-so may have said this, but I don't think it was a stab against my humanity. I don't know what was going on with that nurse that particular day. I don't know what was going on with that Ryan White coordinator that particular year. I don't know what was going on with that HRSA project officer. Am I talking to somebody? Am I talking to you? Baby, people are doing their best. And so we make assumptions that people are doing their best, not internalize or personalize everything. Because I tell people all the time, even though this is being recorded, at Gilead, they say, how's Gilead? I said, child, everything's good. My paycheck here every 2 weeks, never short, never late. Oh, how's it, you adjusting? I'm not thinking about anything else anymore. Meaning, I'm here and my only competition is HIV. Yeah. My only competition. And this heifer right here is a bitch sometimes. Right? So if I'm fighting against HIV, I ain't got time to worry about Gina at Merck, so-and-so at Jan. No, baby, listen, we all here together because we're doing what? Our best. So just remember that folks that are in here living with, affected by, leading programs, guiding, making life-altering decisions for people, do your best. Do your best courageously, transparently. Be vulnerable. Tell people when they hurt you. Tell people when they shamed you. Tell people when they disregarded you. But do it in a way that affirms that they were doing their best and there was no harm intended. Sorry.
Thank you, Kaida. So another place you can do your best is on planning councils. If you want to have a say in how policies are, what's going on, you got to be at the table. If you're not at the table, you can't complain. That's like voting. If you don't vote, how you going to say the mayor wasn't no good? You didn't even get out your bed to go vote for the mayor. So you have to be at these planning bodies. You have to be involved. And I see some young people in the room, and I know earlier was like, we're speaking to the choir. But young people, y'all don't know some of this stuff we talking about because we don't talk about it all the time. Y'all ever heard of 076? But you know it now. You know it was the AZT study. There's so many things you're going to learn in this thing. I've been doing this work 20 plus years, living with HIV 28 years, and I learn something new every day. Yeah. But please get involved in planning councils. Get involved at planning bodies. Let your voice be heard. That's my commercial. Back to the program.
And the side effects may cause non-stigmatizing behavior.
No, when I go out and talk, and I always tell people, I say, look, don't ask me any medical questions. I'm not a real doctor. I'll play one on TV, but then they kind of laugh. So this question I want to ask of everybody, because we know that it's real. How do factors such as race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and age, we don't talk about that, the old people, impact the ways in which stigma operates in healthcare settings? Y'all want me to read it again?
No.
Mm-mm. Oh, for Michael, he can't
Yes,
hear.
I will do it again. How do factors such as race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and age impact the ways in which stigma operates in healthcare settings?
Okay, so I'm going to take it away from HIV just for a second. I'm going to just grab it for a second, but I'm going to give it back. So, and plus I have to go to the restroom, so thank you, Sonia, for letting me go, so I'm going to talk really fast. So, in January 1st, 2020, those people that know me intimately in here know that I survived 4 strokes. How? I don't know. The neurologist at Ochsner said the same thing, and at Emory, but I'm here. And I remember being in the hospital at Emory, research institution. You know, I go in with my pharmaceutical stuff thinking I know something. Mind you, my face, you know, I can't talk, can't walk, can't do anything. And I remember going in and getting into my room. And it was January 1st. It was New Year's Day, right? And so I'm there with all of the techs and everybody that had to work on January 1st. You know they was mad. I'll be mad too. And so I go to the hospital and I get to my room and I had this one nurse that, I mean, Dr. Deary, every time I was just, and I'm like Gina. Those of you that know me know I say a lot of words that should not be said publicly. To my child, to myself, to God. I just say a lot of words. And I don't apologize for them because I'm angry in that moment. And so Jenny is laughing. So I'm just like saying words. So I'm like, this heifer, now mind you, I just had 4 strokes. So I'm like, this heifer could be, you know, if anybody sees somebody with a stroke. And so I started to say to myself, I wonder how I would feel if I had to work on the first, right? So even in the midst of a very vulnerable, hard moment, it's like, oh my God, I wonder how I would feel. And so I remember a white physician came in, a neurologist, and me and this nurse had some issues throughout the night. And so I needed my, what is that thing where they keep the PICC going? Yep. I needed my PICC removed because I bruise easily. And I guess she thought because I was black I wouldn't bruise, but it was purple. And no PICC had gone in all day. And so I was like, move the PICC to the other arm. And she told me no. Come to find out, she put in my chart that I was refusing to take my med. She put all this stuff in my chart. And I was like, wow. But what ended up happening is I had a white neurologist to come in, and she said, Mrs. Matefa, I heard you had a hard night. White woman. I heard you had a hard night. I was like, no, I didn't. I slept. And she said, well, so you're here, you had the strokes. Do you know what caused it? And I was like, no, they said I had a blood clot. She was like, well, I heard that you're getting a divorce. And I was like, yeah. Exactly. She was like, I heard you're getting a divorce. And I was like, she said, there are 4 things that start with MEN. She was like menstruation, menopause, and some other stuff. And then she was like, with men, we just have to let them do, just let them do what they want to do. I saw your face, sis, right there. Let them do it. It's just what we should expect. And I was like, wait, I didn't know patriarchy was on the menu for breakfast. I wanted oatmeal with grapes and a little brown sugar, right? And I say all that to say in terms of race, there were many assumptions made. Many assumptions. One assumption was that we had beef, me and the ex-husband. We did, but she didn't need to make that assumption. You know what I'm saying? But more importantly, how dare you enter a space, say and think what you said, and then put that information in my chart, knowing it was going to dictate how everyone else interacted with me moving forward. Oftentimes in healthcare, we do that. oftentimes, and I'll give a really, really quick example, and I'm going to use you and I. I transitioned from one company to go to another company. Sometimes if one of us in here have a bad experience with someone, that bad experience will outweigh everything. Do you recommend Michael for a job? Oh, yeah, matter of fact, he got all these credentials, done went to the colleges and stuff, that endured all of the heartache of a PhD, and the only thing that you can deduce your response to is, we have to be mindful of what we say. I tell my daughter this all the time. Be mindful of how you refer to your mother, to yourself, and publicly. And y'all know the other part of that. But we have to be mindful of what spirit and energy we put out into the world. It comes back full circle. So when it's time for Merck to decide who they needed, and my only response was, it must be somebody that's from here. Like when I leave Gilead, it must be somebody from here. Y'all can do this work. We just here to facilitate a pathway. But I'm not here to be like, oh, they act like this. Oh, they do that. No, let that go. Let that crap go. You will be with cancer, fibroids, all the other ish that comes from when you harden your heart to not see the possibility in another human being. That's how stigma in the healthcare setting is impacted by race and all the other factors. Okay, now I gotta go potty.
So for age, to hear stories of women of age, 60, 70-year-old women who their husband has passed, and then they start getting sick, and then it's realized that the husband had passed away from HIV, but they were never tested because old people don't have sex. Really? Like, when I first got into the state, I wanted to test at a lot of the older places, the older homes, go in. Let me go into the aging councils. Let me go in there. Why would you want to do that? I'm like, well, for one, my mama, love you. My mama just got done telling me that she had a really good oil change. And she was 70 years old. I'm sorry, they're still having sex, and just people don't think about it. They're not doing it. We need to remind ourselves that we are still human above 50 years old. Like, we are still human. We still like to enjoy ourselves. Ask those questions. Don't be afraid. We're all, I know y'all can't be like Gina and Kiara and I or anything, but, you got to be open about it. You got to remember, we have to educate our young because they're our future, and that's 100% the truth. And we got some rock star children coming up, rock star children, and we got to remember that we have to remind ourselves and remember that, for one, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't have been undetectable in 3 weeks without those people that have come above 50 years of age. Miss Gina went through hell in that AZT study for me to go into my doctor's appointment, get handed one dang pill. And I'm ever so grateful for all of them that have come of age. So we cannot forget our age and the people that have come to, love us and educate us. And we got to remember, they're still having fun too, so let's keep asking them, hey, do y'all need some prep? I've tested people 60-some years old, and ask them about prep, and they're like, you're asking me? I said, baby, when's the last time you had some fun? Well, I don't have to worry about that, though, do I? Baby, did you have sex? Yeah? Then you need to. I don't care who you are. I don't care what color you are. I don't care what you look like on the outside, what you do, what you call yourself. I don't care who you are. If you're cisgender, straight, whatever, you need to know your status. You need to be tested because it's everywhere. It's just like addiction. It has no name. It has no fear. It will go wherever it wants. It'll go wherever we allow it to go.
I'll go last. I think there's better statements I can make.
Can you read the question one more time? I don't want to go off on the wrong tangent.
How do factors such as race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and age impact the ways in which stigma operates in healthcare settings?
Okay, well, I'm 28, and I have been younger than 28, obviously, in recent times, in fact. And let me tell you, the way people treat you when you're young is kind of rough. You know, they don't think that you know anything. They don't think that you're educated. They don't think that you're someone who sits there and studies things before you go into the doctor, and you look up your symptoms not on WebMD because, you know, you're trying to figure out what's wrong. Like, I diagnosed all of my mental health disorders except for PTSD before I went in, and I went to my doctors, and I would say, I think I have this is a problem, and I would like it to be fixed. And that was the only way they would, because nobody ever listened to me when I didn't educate myself on my problem first. Because at one point, I would go into the doctor and know more about depression than they did. And they had no idea how to treat me. And I had no idea that I had to go to a psychologist because no one told me. And, it was so rough getting the care that I needed, getting people to take me seriously. Like, they put you on these meds that make you feel like a zombie, where you don't feel the lows, so you're not real depressed, but you don't feel the highs either. You don't feel happy. You're there. And that's it. And it took months for one of my doctors to hear me say this. And it took me stopping my meds cold turkey and telling my doctor that's what happened for them to hear it. Because I was tired of how it made me feel. And you didn't listen to me because I'm young. I have been, in and out of psychiatry since I was like 15. So, and now you go in, and I guess this is a good story. It was a breath of fresh air. I went into a psychologist, and he told me, actually, I will call him out by name, Dr. Chandler at Access Health, amazing. He is, so great. And he asked me, I told him I was non-binary, and one of the first things he asked me was what kind of meds I was interested in taking, what I had taken in the past, and then he asked me if I wanted to go on hormones. And that was so important to me because it was in my first meeting with him, and he took me very seriously. And I told him about my gender dysphoria and, all of these issues that I've been having with my feminine body. And, he was just like, well, he gave me, a list of things that I could do to help my dysmorphia. And he gave me, the option of hormones if I wanted them, if I wanted to become more masculine. And that was an opportunity that nobody had ever given me before, even though I had mentioned something like this many, many times to at least a dozen doctors. And, it's the stigma. Nobody wants to treat for that. No one wants to give you hormones because then you have to go in often and get your blood work done, and they have to do the work and the math because I'm overweight and I want hormones. God forbid someone do some math. But, stigma has made me very stubborn. And I'm very grateful for that because I can stand up for myself now because I could never do that before. And now I get mad enough to where I can. And I can do it kindly without going off on anybody either because I have these amazing doctors who did back me up.
Awesome.
Thank you for sharing that, Clover. And because as I hear these experiences, not only have I'm familiar with them within healthcare settings, but it's also makes me think of my own experiences as well. I was diagnosed and treated for cancer, for renal cancer, some years ago. And I was grateful to my doctor who discovered the cancer. I was not really complaining of real issues, but systemically, because of tests that he ran, he was able to locate a tumor on my left kidney. And it ended up having it partially removed, part of that kidney that had the tumor. I remember going back to this doctor, and again, I'm very grateful to him for the care and service that he provided. But a number of visits after, following up and what have you, just my normally routine care visits, because he was my primary care physician, I distinctly felt unseen by him, though. And it was difficult because I appreciated him for what he had done, but I felt like I became, I don't know, like he saw that was the person that cancer is gone, and good job. That's how it felt. And I just didn't feel, Kaida said something earlier about, how Oprah Winfrey, saw what everyone needed. And this was a moment when I needed to feel seen and heard and validated, and I just don't feel like I was getting that. I felt like every time I saw him, he was just congratulating himself for having found my cancer and was like, good job. But I still had health concerns and issues, and I just felt like those were just like diminished in his eyes. Now again, here's the problem. This is what stigma does. Because I don't know if those things were happening because I'm gay or because I'm black. I don't know. And it hurt. So I didn't know what to do. My husband said he would find me a different physician. And he did, and I'm so grateful to him. But if I didn't have that support, I don't know what I would have done if I would have just stopped going to the doctor. I don't know, because I felt so, again, not seen, and I was like, because I still had blood pressure problems, and I was like, doctor, can we talk about that? And it just seemed like he wasn't hearing it. He didn't see it, and I don't know. But again, the person who is experiencing that stigma, when you've experienced it, like Clover has said, and like Sonia has said, that you begin to not realize if it's because I'm a woman or because I'm overweight or because I have HIV, and then you become hypervigilant, and then you don't, and then the people that you meet in the healthcare settings, then you become the person that that Kaida was describing herself earlier, because of all of the things that you go through as a patient, as a client. And I just would ask that we remember that sort of thing, that we hear each other, we see each other, and we look past the disease, because there's a person behind all it. If you crunch numbers, realize there's a person behind those numbers. I just want to say that.
Before we go on, can everybody turn to the person next to them and say, I see you? I see you, Kaida. I see you. I see you. I see you.
Nice to see you. Nice to see you. And it's nice to see you again.
I see you.
Dr. Derry, we're not done yet. I just wanted to break it up and do that, because a lot of times we don't feel seen. We really don't. So it's important that we remind each other that I see you. You're important to me. All right.
Even if I don't like you.
Thank you.
Exactly.
I'm sorry, sweet.
That's okay. Now, Michael then, took me to a place, so I need you to repeat the question for me.
How do factors, that's the one we're on, right?
We don't know where everyone.
All right, we're going to be on that one anyway. How do factors such as race, gender identity, sexual orientation, and age impact the ways in which stigma operates in healthcare settings?
Okay. Well, I want to shake the table just a little bit.
Shake it, girl.
So I want to go all the way back, and I want to talk about race first. when we talk about stigma around race in healthcare, we have to remember that, for instance, the field of gynecology was founded and based off the torture and experimentation of black enslaved women. Let's start there. We have to remember that for the longest, and this is still present within healthcare, it was thought that, black people have a higher tolerance for pain. So how does that show up, and how does that stigma show up now when we show up to doctors and we're in pain? It may be assumed that we're drug seeking, or, the care is not preventative, it's more so reactive. Whereas our counterparts can go and get preventative care. They're, oh, well, let's run this gamut of tests. Let's do this, let's do that. But we have to damn near die before we get to the point of having those tests run. And so for me, I've seen this play out because I come from a lineage of strong black women. I've seen this play out with my grandmother, for instance. In 2010, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer. And let me just say this, and I'm gonna keep it together. I didn't realize that she wasn't aware that she had cancer until the doctor left out of the room. And he gave a very generic explanation. Well, you have this going on, we gotta do this amount of treatment, and speaking in all types of jargon. And he left. And she asked me, she said, well, what he said? I said, well, Mama, he said you got cancer. And the look on her face, to this day, it still broke my heart, because in that moment, when she heard me say it, that's when she realized she had cancer. And this man had been her doctor since I was a child. At that time, I was 27 years old. You did not have the wherewithal or the bandwidth to sit down and explain to this 70-something-year-old woman, to have the bedside manner to sit down and explain, or even the good sense to say, well, I see you're with her. Let me try to break this down for you. So I ended up having to go back to his office to get more insight to where I can break it down to her for a level that she can understand at that time. When we talk about that stigma being present, it's this assumption that everybody has the same or receives information the same way. Everybody can comprehend things the same way, and it doesn't mean, that's not saying that some people's comprehension is less than others. It means that we learn and we receive and we perceive things in different ways, and that takes a cultural competence. So when we see that stigma showing up, when we talk about, how black women in general, voices aren't heard in healthcare, how you have to fight tooth and nail to get someone to say, look, I don't think this is because I'm having a backache. I think something's going on. Or not even just women, people with uterus in general. When you go into a physician, you have to be able, as a provider, I feel like you have to be able to, again, have some humility around who you're dealing with and have the compassion to stop and learn about the population that you're working with.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Because we're going to get into some strategies after this, y'all.
So it's such a good question. It's so deep, and it's something I think about all the time. So we live in a country that's racist, right? It's ruled by the patriarchy. And that structural discrimination we see in our society, of course, is going to filter down to medicine. I mean, think about who the early doctors were. They were the people who were taking care of the leaders that were building up this patriarchal white supremacist society that we have. And so I'm going to give you a couple of quick quotes just to drive that point home. President Biden once said, you guys may remember, that poor kids were just as bright and as smart as white kids.
Yep.
That's the implicit bias that's there. And then I'm going to read you Dr. calling him doctor. Oh, no, don't do this. Senator Bill Cassidy, who was once a charity physician.
Great doctor.
Right. About a third of our so he was talking to Politico, and he said, and he was being asked about maternal mortality rates, and he said about a third of our population is African American, speaking about Louisiana. About a third of our population is African American. African Americans have a higher incidence of maternal mortality. So if you correct our population for race, we're not as much of an outlier as it would otherwise appear. Do you guys understand what he was saying? Basically, what he was saying was we have such high maternal mortality rates, but a lot of it is African American, so if you correct for race, we're just as good as the rest of the states. That's the implicit bias that exists. And as physicians, there's huge implicit bias. And you said it perfectly well. I was going to comment on the studies about pain and how medical students assume that African American or Black Americans have higher pain tolerances. Of course, that's not the case. But I'll tell you about another really interesting study looking specifically at implicit biases amongst, and I'm going to just make it as simple as possible. Let's just say white and men and women physicians, and then black men and women physicians. And when they looked at white male physicians, no surprise, the highest levels of implicit bias. The highest levels of implicit bias. You know who had almost zero implicit bias? Black women physicians. Black women physicians hit the zero mark. They have almost zero. But how many people of color are in medicine? Almost zero, right? I heard a statistic, I don't believe that this is true, but my colleague Doc Griggs says it all the time, that it's easier for a young black male to get into the NBA than it is to get into medical school, right? So, okay, but let's take this. A book I'm writing right now is looking at structural discrimination in medicine, and I use Tuskegee as the point, the center point, because the one little known fact about Tuskegee, as horrible as it is, and horrible, right? We did not treat men living with syphilis. We watched them die. Horrible and painful deaths, okay? That Tuskegee was a training ground for physicians that went on and did other experiments like that, not only around the country, but around the world. And this is something that's not known, and this is the book that I'm looking to write, is to describe how Tuskegee was a training ground that the U.S. government allowed these clinicians to do these studies in different parts of the country and the world. The structural discrimination is built into the system, and we need to do things that can actually turn it around, like the strategies that you were talking about. And it's so important. It's important for us to be able to have these conversations too. Lastly, one story, because we're talking about ageism, and I want to lighten the mood a little bit. So I'm a physician at LCMC. I just came from work, and I have to go back to the hospital. So I was at WestJeff once, maybe about 7 years ago. And we have a guy who's in his mid-70s. Nobody could figure out what was going on with him. Difficulty breathing, just really like it was a very, very strange pulmonary picture that he had, and nobody could figure out what was going on with him. So finally, after 3 weeks of being in the hospital, trying to figure out why his pulmonary picture wasn't COPD, he wasn't a smoker, he had this weird restrictive lung disease that just didn't fit any of the categories, we finally did something that was very invasive, and we literally went in and had to do a biopsy, an open lung biopsy, which is, if you need to do it, you need to do it, but it's invasive. You shouldn't, 3 weeks in the hospital, we had to get to the bottom of why he wasn't keeping his oxygen levels up. PCP pneumonia. It completely blew us all away, including this guy right here, treating him for pneumonia. How did I not think about HIV? How did I not think about HIV? So, of course, I did an HIV test. He was positive, right? This is a man in his mid-70s, right? The implicit bias for me, right? What if it were a 45-year-old fill in the blank? Right, 24-year-old, whatever, okay? Implicit bias. 75-year-old male, just recently widowed 4 years ago. So I went to go talk to him, and I told him his diagnosis, and he just like, he's like, oh, yeah, okay. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, and he tells me his story. He was recently widowed. He loved his wife. 50 years they were married. It was devastating for him. He went and got a prosthesis, a penile kind of prosthesis, and started going to visit the, for lack of a better word, the sex workers, brothels regularly, and never using condoms. And that was his, and he's like, I figured this would happen to me eventually. And one, it never came out in conversation, and two, we never thought about it because he was 75 years old, and it comes exactly to the point that you were speaking. And my implicit bias, and I have it. And I think that if we talk about clinicians and their implicit biases, you have to look at yourself in the mirror first. It starts with the person. I love the saying that when you're pointing a finger at somebody, you have 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. And so I have to look at my implicit biases regularly before I can ask other people to do theirs as well. So.
Yes. One Friday, my mom called me and asked me for condoms. And I hung up on her. I did. I was shocked. I was really shocked because she was old. And I was like, oh my, yes, I said it. And I was like, oh my goodness, I called my sisters. And I was like, hey, let me tell y'all something. I said, Mama asked me for condoms.
Shame with Mama.
And my older sister said, did you give them to her? And I was like, no. And she was like, why not? And then my other sister said, oh, you want your mama to get HIV? And then I thought about it and I said, well, no. So I walked to her house, I went to her house, and I had them in a bag, and I knocked on the door, and she opened the door, and I just had them. And I wouldn't look at her, and I couldn't look at her for a while. I felt so bad. I felt so bad afterwards, you know. But then my mom's human, you know, she's human. And I was like, shoot, when I get that age, I hope I really get that too. So let's talk about strategies, because we're getting to the end of our time together. So let's discuss some strategies, some things that we can do. And we want y'all to jump in too on this one. So when we're thinking about strategies, what do y'all think could help to reduce internalized stigma?
I would say, I mean, you know, the person in the mirror, right? Michael Jackson said it best. Man in the mirror. You know, I'm looking at the man, person, them, they, theirs in the mirror. I think we have to start looking at ourselves, and we feel it in our bodies. You know when it's time for a change. You know good and well when it's time for it. You know when that person laying next to you, you like, okay, these rough feet ain't working for me no more. You got to go. Or this job is not working for me no more. This pension is just not that cute. Yeah. If I have hair loss, right? Forget the pension when you got hair loss because you done stayed somewhere too long, right? We have to look at the person in the mirror and be willing to make a change.
Other than being willing to make the change is that you have to be willing to be kind to yourself. That is the most important, is that you love yourself and you value yourself and you stop saying these negative things to yourself, even if you don't say them out loud. Stop saying them in your head. Or after you say it in your head, you know, go back. Because someone once told me that the first thought that comes to your head is societal conditioning. It is from the patriarchy, it's from the heterosexist world, it's from sexism. You know, well, that's the patriarchy, but whatever. It's from homophobia. That's the one I was looking for. And the second thought that your response to that is who you are on the inside. And so don't feel bad about having these thoughts because they are conditioned into us. They are what our brain puts forward as the general consensus, right? But then we have to stop and think about who we are, what we value, and we should value ourselves because we deserve to. I love myself. Like, I am confident in my body, and I'm confident in who I am. And, you know, it took a long time for me to feel that way, but I do. And so now the decisions that I make about myself, I make with self-love first. And that's very important.
Yes.
Very well said. And I think I can follow up really well from that because my thought was to do that self-care, if that includes maybe therapy. You know, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't represent, for those of us on the panel that do therapy, how that can be helpful. And when one goes to therapy, what they would hope to get is that right there, what you just heard. Like, that was a therapy session, right, in and of itself. Yeah, I mean, but it certainly shows. It definitely shows, because we don't all come to it. I think you said something like this earlier, that we don't all come to this at the same level. And there are some of us who might be able to, whether it's compartmentalize or deflect or whatever the world throws at us, and then some of us who may have a little bit more of a struggle with that. Wherever you are with that, you still need to be able to take that time to do that self-care for yourself, to love yourself, and do your own work in wherever that means for you. And so, yeah, I just thought that, thank you guys for being here, because, I mean, just being able to share your experiences have really, I think, really enrich this conversation. So thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing of yourselves. Thank you.
I think I want to take a page from what Kaida had mentioned earlier, just about, really, when she mentioned not necessarily making the assumption that the intent is always bad, I think a good way to move into strategizing is the word that I use for myself in my own life, the word that I use with clients I work with or anyone I encounter, is grace. Lead with grace. Give yourself grace. As Clover was saying, be kind to yourself. Be gracious to others until it's time to not be. I'm definitely not saying be dainty and gracious and when it's time for you to flare up and fight, because those times do come, right? But lead with grace in your intent. Lead with compassion. As all of us, like, we're human. We definitely are going to have our moments where we're not going to be able to show up 100%. But as Kaida again said, we're all doing our best. So do your best to show up with compassion. If you have to really dig into yourself to put yourself or one of your loved ones into the people who we serve, into their shoes, then do that. But lead with compassion, and remember that we're working with people who are vulnerable, and we ourselves at times will be vulnerable.
That's right. Sonia, before you do that one, the same question, but at a clinical level.
Okay, so repeat your question.
So the question is, what types of strategies would help to reduce HIV-related stigma among healthcare workers at a clinical level?
Education, education, education. From peers, from those of us, like Clover, myself living with HIV, myself as a, inactive, thriving, user. Make it so people want to come and get help. Open your eyes. One problem we're having is, we have detox locations that don't want to let people know that my harm reduction's there, because they want them to detox. Not everybody's ready at the same time, as we just been saying. So, on that clinical level, we gotta remember, we gotta take our time. We have to educate ourselves so we're giving the right information out there, and we have to be available for those people that we're trying to reach on a daily basis. My life involves a whole lot of avenues that have a personal level on it. But the stigma is real, I'm going to put one plug in before I pass off the phone, the mic. There's a 1-800 number. It's 1-800-NEVER-USE-ALONE. And also my number is 716-238-3555. If you know anyone, stop the stigma. We lose our children every day because of stigma, because they feel that they can't go and get help. I didn't realize what the date when I agreed to this, but 2 years ago today, I lost my oldest child that I raised because of stigma, because he was too afraid and he didn't have anybody with him. So we need to make sure that our 40-year-olds 30-year-olds, 20-year-olds. No. We've been there, we've done that. Come to us. We're not going to shame you. We're not going to judge you. We're going to give you the resources to make sure that you're going to survive like we did. And when you're ready, you know, I mean, everybody was trying to lead this horse to water. Until it was my time, I wasn't ready. So again, stigma is real, guys. Like, don't let us die of sicknesses. Don't let us not get treatment. Speak to us as we are. Stop thinking that, well, I'm saying something about somebody else, but I love you, so it's not about you. I'm just talking about everybody else. No, damn it, it's about us. Stop stigmatizing us. We want to live.
Before you go, Dr. Derry,
Yes.
one of our panelists has to leave. But I want us to all thank Ms. Kaida Mutefa for giving us her time and her words. And
Y'all, I'm a Capricorn.
Y'all gotta do it.
Sensitive. Y'all gotta give me a bigger applause. Sponsorships for everybody. But no, here you go. Thank y'all so much. I'll be back.
Yes.
And please don't stop me on my way to the elevator because I have to get to the West Bay.
Go ahead.
Because I promised this woman I would be there on time.
Be on time.
Yes, and she deserves it.
Yes, yes, and it's Friday.
Yes.
Dr. Derry?
So my last slide that when I give when I'm talking to physicians about structural discrimination in medicine is things that we need to do. So I'm just going to go over the list of things, of strategies. Number one strategy, the most important thing is that we have to increase diversity in medical students. Right now, end stop, we need more black and brown individuals that go to medical school so that this way people feel comfortable going to doctors who look like them, and children go to a doctor who looks like them is so powerful and it's so important. So we need to stop with the barriers that we as a medical community put up that make it so hard to get into medical school, and we need to increase the diversity of medical students. 2, I ask everybody that they need to support Black Lives Matter, full stop, right now. 3, we have to support black and brown owned businesses as well as businesses that are run by women as well. That is incredibly important. And then, of course, I get a phone call. And then lastly, I want to end with this because this is probably one of the most important poems, especially in today's society right now. First, they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I'm not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. I think we have to approach this as a community. We all need to love one another, and that is the most important strategy we have, is love.
Love. Yes. And then I already gave y'all the strategy on policy and structural level, right? Getting involved in planning councils, getting involved in planning bodies. That's the best place to make those decisions. You know, I can tell you that in my career, being a part of the planning council was amazing because I got to see my voice in action. So the things we talked about at the table, when organizations started implementing it, I would sit back and say, I was there for that conversation. I remember that conversation. And look, they're doing it. That's how we make change. We can't look for Voss to do it. We can't look for Dalton or Dr. Derry or Sonia. We look at us and each other. You know, I often tell people, because I do a lot of talks with people living with HIV, and I say, you know, I can probably pick that table up by myself. It'll be heavy, but I could probably do it. But imagine how light it would be if we all picked it up together. That's what we have to do. That's how we're going to get rid of stigma. That's how we're going to bounce to zero, by doing it together. So my last question, what should be included in cultural competency training for healthcare workers? And I want everybody to answer that in as short a time as you can. Because now we're between us and the food. So we got
I would say gender identities and pronouns, the use of dead names, the fact that people use injection drugs and that's their own valid choices to make, or that people use drugs in general, and that is their own choice to make. It is not anyone else's choice to make. And that we are allowed to do with our bodies exactly what we want to do with them, as long as we don't harm anybody else.
It's none of your business what's between my legs and who I want to be with. Just remember that. Like, it's not. And what we say really matters, especially those of us that are engaging with our communities. And when I say our communities, I mean we have to be engaging with our communities. We need to be in our communities, boots to the ground, running our mouths. I mean, I will walk into anywhere. I may not be like taken upon at first, but as soon as I start running my mouth, they're like, "Oh, come on, boo, come on." So don't hesitate going somewhere and running your mouth because you're afraid that you're not going to be accepted. Give it that chance, because you never know. For one, you never can stop learning, no matter how old we are, how much we think we know. I mean, you never stop learning. So just remember that somebody else might be saying something that you've already heard, but keep listening, because there might be that little extra in there for you.
I would say that physicians need to check their privilege at the door as they walk into the room. You've heard incredible just abuse of privilege with each of these stories that exist, and so cultural competency needs to include a section on privilege and the extraordinary privilege we have as physicians and clinicians, and we need to check it at the door when we walk into a clinic room or a hospital room.
Thank you for those comments again. I mean, I keep feeling like I'm following up behind what you guys are just kind of chime in on y'all's statements in a way, but I'll put it a different way. The person that realizes they know something really realizes that they know nothing at all. Okay? So just kind of speaking to what you're saying, I don't believe in cultural competency, because that assumes that you're competent in something. I'm black, and I don't know everything about being black. So I think we need to start there with reimagining that connotation that cultural competency is something that we're trying to get or achieve. It is a lifelong process where we're always learning and have to be willing and open to learning. So I think that's where we start, and realizing that we don't have all the answers. We're here to learn. We're here to be open to learn and love one another. Yeah.
Yes.
I think the inclusion of social determinants and the nuances that we face at the various intersections that we sit at is something that we should do our best to try to include and provide our cultural competency training. As Michael said, it's ongoing, it's ever changing, right? But we need to do our best to be well versed in some of the issues that affect our individuals getting to and remaining in care, and then also have mechanisms, as many mechanisms as possible in place to address those nuances and those issues. So.
Thank you.
I wanted to say one more thing, and that, cultural competency is not necessarily inherent. You have to be observant. You have to see these things. You have to learn them. And it is okay if you don't know them, but it is important that you do learn them. And in order to learn things, we study and we practice. And so practicing cultural competency in your place of work, holding your coworkers responsible, telling them that they are misgendering you, telling them that they misgendered somebody else, and that it's very important that we don't do that to clients. Like, I'll let it slide for me because I dress like a girl. I wear skirts and stuff to work because I like them. And so it's so incredibly important to practice. Because what happens when a trans person walks in a room and you haven't practiced and you mess up several times, and they don't trust you anymore. They don't think that you have enough respect for them to use their proper pronouns and their proper name. And so take a minute, Once a week, have someone in your clinic be another gender, and everyone has to refer to them as another gender. Like a cis male would have to go by she, her pronouns for the whole day. One, it'll make him feel a little weird, which is what makes me feel when everyone calls me ma'am. And it will make them used to referring to somebody as a different gender if you don't, one that's not, yes, exactly, presenting as. And so yeah, practice.
Yes. I never used the word cultural competency. In my own life, I use cultural humility, because then I can tell you what I don't know. And it's so much I don't know. When I first started working with transgender women, I didn't know. And I had one client who was amazing. She's in New York now. I love her to death. She's my daughter. And every day she would come to my office and sit with me and tell me stuff so that I could do the work that I needed to do. Because she was my first transgender client, but she wasn't going to be my last.
Correct.
And I needed to know because I didn't know. Let's give it up for, Clover, yes. Yes.
So speaking of that, it's a lot of emotional labor to teach people about being trans. 100%. And it's not my responsibility. I do it all the time because I feel like people should know, and I usually have the spoons for it. But do your own research. Don't just think, oh, well, I'll just ask somebody who's trans. Yep. Because nobody owes you that emotional labor. It is hard. And having to explain yourself over and over again to so many people, and they just expect it of you. It's like, what they expect you to teach them. We're not teachers. We don't get paid for that, Teachers don't get paid enough, and we certainly don't get paid anything for it, so. And that's it. Thank y'all.
Let's give it up for our amazing panel, Alea, Michael, Clover, Sonia, Dr. Gary, thank Vox, and everybody who put this together. And let's just enjoy the rest of the day, y'all. Vox, you want to say something? Of course. All right, girl.
Let's give it up for Gina. Amazing moderator. Thank you so much. This was such an insightful and beautiful and wonderful conversation. And we have the rest of the day, so please don't go anywhere. I want to give a plug. I hope you guys like my t-shirt. Make sure that at the end of the day or before you leave to fill out an evaluation form, and you can submit it for some of the swag items that we have. And also tomorrow is our Bounce to Zero ball. I don't know where Syria is at, but she's been working really hard in planning this event along with other members of the Devaney team and our team at the office. And so please join us. It's going to be amazing. And we've also partnered with our transportation safety program, and they've been able to help us get $10 voucher to and from the ball. So that's available to you all. And I would like to introduce our fearless leader, Dr. Jennifer Avegno, the director of the New Orleans Health Department. Without her support and, as busy as she is, she's always there to support our activities. So I want to bring her up here to say a few words. And thank you to the panel. That's wonderful. Thank you.
Twice. First of all, for making you late for lunch, but I promise I'll be quick. And second of all, I was supposed to be with you this afternoon, but my youngest daughter got into the finals of her school's huge oratory competition, and part of self-love is making sure your children still love you. But this is my daughter who, at 13, cares really passionately about HIV and stigma, so she's going to be excited that I was here. And I really just want, on behalf of the health department and the city, because you have a real champion and our leader, I hope you know that, extend the thanks to all of you for being here, particularly for you all for being so vulnerable and brave openly to people that you don't know. As a physician, and Mark Allen, you really hit on this, it is really, really important for me to hear over and over and over and over and over the ways in which, big and small, we are failing to care for those who need us and who depend upon us. And so this is critical for us. It's also critical for those of us who work in public health, so that the programs and the policies that we design actively dismantle the harms of the past. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. Obviously, Vatsana and Daniel, and we have a pretty fabulous team at Ryan White, so let's give it up for them. Thank you. And enjoy your lunch.